and welcome back to Mountaintop Repair Shop. In part 1 of this series, we fixed up the key contacts and replaced some broken keys. We also replaced some broken potentiometers, and we repaired some cold solder joints on other ones. We left off just after replacing the power cord because it was time to shift gears a little bit. It's time to work on some fabrication. I wanted to recreate these sides using some solid maple hardwood. This texture is going to make for a rough recreation if I were to trace around this textured edge. Luckily I have a Juno-60 with the same sides, still factory original. So I'll use one of those and that'll give us a smooth, accurate representation. I'm going to get a block of 1 3/16 inch maple. That's about, right around 30 millimeters, which is what the factory thickness was. And I'm also going to get some dark stain. I always wanted to change the outdated, look of the browned end caps. Since I'm not doing this to the original factory spec, we're going to have to one-up the design, but the black stain should really give things a nice modern look. So we start with some plywood that I already cut to be a little larger than the traced lines that I'd drawn at first. I used a miter saw and a table saw to cut these plywood blanks, but you could just do it with a jigsaw. Just be sure to stay 1/8 away from the edge. I used the 2 screw holes to attach the plywood to the Juno-60 end cap. I have a 1/2 inch blank for the inside template. The inside template is mainly just for making the indent in the bottom where the base of the keyboard attaches. Now I'll take the laminate router and with a tracing bit, copy the shape of the Juno-60 inside end right onto that 1/2 inch plywood. The blue tape is there to protect the edge from the router bearing. With that complete, it's time to remove the template from the end cap. Let's remove the screws and take off the inner template. I have a 3/4 inch thick blank for the outside template. You can see the pencil trace mark I made and how I was sure to cut at least 1/8 of an inch away from it. We can now connect the 3/4 inch plywood to the outer side of the end cap using the same 2 screw holes. I'll need to adjust the flush trim tracing bit to cut the full 3/4 inch depth. You can always trace twice to be sure to get an accurate copy. I noticed that I floated away from the back edge of the end cap, so I hit it again and then continued on with the rest. Now we've made a perfect copy on that 3/4 inch plywood. This template will be used to cut the end caps out of the 1 3/16 inch hardwood. We can remove the blue tape now. It protected the edge perfectly for the tracing process. Next, I'll copy some vitals onto the template for quick reference later. The depth of the inside indent and the edge offset of the faceplate screw holes. I'll drill out the faceplate mounting screw holes to the proper diameter. I'm using a 5/32 inch drill bit. Now this will be the piece that the screw goes through rather than into. Now it's time to trace the outer template onto the block of 1 3/16 inch hard maple. We need 2 end caps, so I'll flip it over and trace one for the other side. As you can see, I check quite a few times to make sure the grain lines up in the most attractive way. So just like the plywood, I've already cut the excess off with a miter saw and a table saw. This illustrates the cuts I made, and you can see the cut is comfortably away from the trace line. This flush trim router bit is a 1/2-inch spiral upcut. Since the router is upside down and mounted to a table, the bit will actually be cutting in a downward motion. The spiral bit cuts clean and is less likely to tear out extra material because it isn't chipping away the wood, it's slicing it downwards. We do the same for the other end cap, trimming it flush to the outside template we made earlier. Now we have two freshly cut 1 3/16 inch thick hard maple end caps. They have sharp edges and are ready for the inside indent and some profiling. First we'll take our inside template and clamp it to the end cap and the table. We line it up perfectly as it's the exact same size. In this situation, it's actually more accurate to feel the lineup rather than to see it. This is where I screw things up a little. Using a standard chipping style router bit, I got close to the end of the run, and then this happened. So on the next side, I drilled these two start-stop points with a Forstner bit. Then I made several passes, eating away a little each pass until I was perfectly flush. This is the indent we're looking for. The keyboard base should fit nicely in here, considering the keyboard base is a 1/2-inch plywood. Next up, we'll use this 1/8 roundover bit on the small laminate router. Since we can see around this side, we'll do this side as well. It sticks up higher than the metal panels and the keys on the keyboard. This side is the outside, and we'll do the entire perimeter. Just gotta check the bottom real quick to make sure the bearing is actually going to hit some wood and not fall into the groove, and it looks good. The 1/8-inch roundover really gives it some character and a professional look. It's what they would have done if they were using a solid wood instead of a composite particle board with a wood laminate cover. You can't round over laminate unless that laminate is at least as thick as your roundover. Like on my Nord, for example, they used a solid hardwood end cap, so of course they rounded over the edges. Next step is some hand sanding to remove the burn marks. Then I'll hit it with the orbital sander. I sanded them with 120 grit and then a 180 grit sandpaper after that. We'll want to drill these faceplate mounting screw holes because they have machine screws that go right through them into the faceplate, and we don't want any resistance from the wood. A drill press is definitely preferred so the holes are drilled perfectly perpendicular to the surface. Now moving on to the finishing process. It'll be quite useful to mount them to this plywood finishing base that I made. The one on the left is the one that I split while routing the base indent. It's been glued and smoothed and is ready for finishing. Alright, so here we have our Juno wings. The plan here is to go with a clear stain, but I want them to be black. All the original ones were brown, a variation of brown, and there's a lot of people who actually make, new cases for Juno's bottoms and the sides, the front edge, and they'll do, a mahogany or something and give it a nice brownish stain. But I'm restoring this keyboard, but it's still going to be my keyboard, and so I'm taking all this time to make these pieces. I want them to be black, to make that Juno look like one of a kind when it's restored. But also, I don't have access to, the dyes and fancy wash coats that I used to at the cabinet shop. So we're going to go a little bit more of, basically consumer grade stain. So we're going to start up with a little Minwax ebony. And even though ebony is a really black stain, it tends to leave things a little brownish. So then I come back with a little onyx on top of that. And then you get your solid black color. We'll be able to see this whole part. The keys are down here. That faceplate comes up and goes through those two holes. So we're going to see all of this wood. That's why I wanted to round this edge and make it look all nice on this side. So we'll finish it right at the bottom because why not? Protection for the wood is good. Add some more color because I'm not sure if the camera can show you, but it's definitely a little brownish. Not too bad, but a little brown. And this is the stage of applying the finish. I haven't wiped it off yet. It's going to get a little bit lighter than that once I wipe it off. Gently try to remove any excess. Don't want to take a lot. Yeah, these things look good. Now we can give this a little air dry time. And then we'll come back here and put on the next layer of stain to get some true black look. So here's our outside looking good. Look at this on here. Oh yeah. Now we're getting black. That's good looking stuff right there. Definitely don't need to run out here. So there's the original color that we've gone out of this darkness compared side by side. You can see this is going to be the black dark side that I'm looking for. All right. Now both end caps have their ebony stain and the extra layer of onyx stain. We'll let them dry for a while. We're spraying these with a coat of catalyzed conversion varnish, a high quality woodworking finish. If you sand too hard, you can sand through the finish and through the stain, leaving behind the wood's natural color, so it's imperative that the sanding is done with extreme care. After that sanding, it's time for another coat. You can really see how the rounded edges shows off the sheen, and the stain, while quite dark, still shows off the wood grain. And here's what they look like after the final coat and a day and a half of drying and curing. A soft medium rubbed sheen and a beautiful wood grain. Time to remove the old end caps. These guys were so beat and torn that putting a chamfer all the way around and spraying them with flexstone texture was actually a vast improvement. I'm happy to retire these end caps in favor of the new custom fabricated hardwood end caps. When I first placed it on the base, I could tell there was a little bit of wood still in the way because of the round point that I made with a Forstner bit when I started that second end cap. I'll shave out that little extra bit with a razor knife and do the same on the other end as well. Now it's fitting perfectly with the plywood base. We'll have to pre-drill the hardwood so we don't split it. And I usually don't put keyboards back together with an impact driver, but in this case we're actually constructing a new connection, so the impact driver is warranted. Flip over to side B and repeat. Man, a lot of flexstone was sprayed on this. There's even a circle that was indented into the texture. The look is just phenomenal. I think it's important that if you're not restoring something back to its original specs, that your design must one-up the original design, and I think we did here. The last step is to put in the faceplate screws, and hopefully they line up perfectly. And we can see here that they actually do, and they come out quite nice. I think we definitely updated it with that dark, rich black stain. Now, as promised, a quick demo of how you can use the TR-707 rhythm composer to control the Arpeggio clock on the Juno-60. Maya Kitty has come to join us today. She's awfully nice. Maya's taking over the studio when I'm not here. So, as promised, we needed to actually check everything that we fixed on the Juno so far. So, let's get right down to it. First off, it's already on, so the power cord works. The transpose button, it works. The frequency knob works quite nice, and also it feels amazing. These new sliders, I'm almost tempted to replace every one of them because of how nice this feels. The other ones, have a little bit more resistance to them. I mean, they still work great. We also have a release slider now with a cap on it. So the high-pass filter, yep, all three levels of the high-pass filter are working just fine. So volume knob is nice and clean. Nothing wrong there. Yeah. I like that you can assign the bender to the filter or the DCO. Or both. Yeah, hear that? So the VCA, when turned up to 100%, has that crackling sound. But at 75% or lower, it's gone. So I've heard that there's a problem with the mute transistors that are on the chorus board. I guess they just mute the keyboard for the power switch. That way you don't get a big pulsing noise. I think part 4 might have that included with removing the rest of the flexstone texture and adding a little bit more of the hardwood with a black finish on the front. She's sleeping. She's already out cold. So earlier when we were demonstrating the frequency knob, I was using the internal arpeggio and the internal clock to run the arpeggio speed. But you can actually control the clock from an outside instrument that has a voltage pulse, kind of like a CV in the old synthesizers. I'm going to change the instrument to rim shot. And then we hit start, we can see where all the rim shots are. Then put our arpeggio mode on, and then we can play anything. It'll play along with it. And if you want to change the range, we can. Those still do the same thing. You want to change directions? Go down only, or go up only, or you can go up and down. It's just the rate that's not going to matter. This thing doesn't care about the rate, but also it gives you the opportunity to play, notes that aren't, in a perfect pattern. There's spaces between these notes. So I'll show you a pattern now where we use all the 16th notes, and it kind of makes for a nice arpeggiator sound that is right in time with the actual drum track. I could do that all night. Well, thanks for watching. In the next installment of the Juno-60 series, we'll see a bender panel restoration as we remove that flexstone texture and start from scratch with bare metal. Keep an eye out for that video and other videos by hitting that subscribe button. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you all again next time on Mountaintop Repair Shop.